Hello, I'm Andy Schmuckler, host of this video series called A Better Human Story. I suppose you've heard the joke that a Buddhist monk, or maybe it's the Dalai Lama in particular, goes up to a hot dog vendor and the caption is, make me one with everything. The joke, but it calls attention to one of the spiritual paths there is in the human world. Certainly, the Eastern religions. If you make somebody like Buddha into the main guide, the thing about Buddha was the enlightenment that he achieved after sitting like he sat for, what was it, a year? And when people undertake Zen Buddhism, Satori as a state of enlightenment, these are not things that I know about from the inside. I've struggled with this make me one with everything desire. When I was a freshman in college, there's a term paper to be required at the end of the second semester of this course that taught us all about the history of philosophy from Aristotle to Machiavelli to St. Augustine. Talking about all those things, and then I get a chance to battle with some issue that I wanted to use this as an opportunity to do, and I tuned in on something that I felt sort of in my soul, which was a desire to be one with everything, and I wrote a paper about sort of there being two ways that one can go there, and one is to dissolve one's boundaries like the mystics do, and like I think the Buddhist and other Eastern traditions dissolve boundaries, I believe. Or whether to bring everything in and be one with everything by containing everything. I'm sure I have that paper someplace, but I've not read it since. But I believe that I sort of yearned in a way for the capacity to have that kind of mystical experience, some kind of mystical experience. Maybe it'd be a burning bush. In fact, that's really kind of what happened eventually. But here I am as a freshman writing a paper, and I'm looking at the fact that I have rather strong boundaries, that I'm not real good at becoming one with everything in that way. And I also found that I had some capacities to become one with everything by bringing it in and intellectually understanding it, the comprehension of everything. So I was always ambitious to put all the pieces together to have some kind of meaningful representation of some kind of big whole that was part of my consciousness. In some ways, I suspect that this is a spiritually and not premium way of becoming one with everything. I tend to believe, or I've always had a part of me that's believed that that the mystics are actually um, the people who represent the most advanced human consciousness. That it's not, I mean, the alternative would be just to say this is sort of some kind of weird path that some folks go on. But I've always thought that in some way that the mystics, whose sense of becoming, that everything is one, some kind of mystical vision that people come back with, and has been in various cultural streams, has been some sort of big deal. That there's some fundamental truth to that, and that the people who have seen that have reached the highest point of human consciousness. Now, maybe that isn't it. Maybe it's not that. Maybe that's not the big discovery of some really big, important truth. Maybe it's just a neat feeling. I don't know. I have had some mystical level experiences, kind of burning bush. And that book is the working of this intellect that got trained to present what I got to see in that sort of transcendent moment. But it wasn't like my boundaries dissolved at all. It was that I comprehended some big piece of the whole. What I comprehended is just parenthetically is the step that our species took a mere 10,000 years ago. Inevitably had consequences that we haven't looked at the kind of force that inevitably would ensue from that. And if you see that, then you understand the whole human story in some fundamentally different ways, because we unleashed a force for no fault of our own that's made things a lot worse than we would have made them if we had a choice. Stepping across the threshold into civilization, according to this, is hugely consequential, would be for any creature. And if you take if you see that force that gets unleashed, everything looks a lot different. So it made me one with a whole big chunk of the world that we're living in. It drove me for, a whole, I don't know, 20 some years. It was the driving force in my life. And it's still something I'm trying to get out there at a betterhumanstory.org. But then over the years, I've continued to look at what that insight exposes about how the human world works. And I've expanded in other dimensions that fundamental idea in such a way as to establish some things like that the moral and spiritual dimensions are real, are important, and are life-serving. That can be derived from that, and it can be shown, and it holds water. So I got a little bit, I've got some fulfillment of having this integrated vision, I call it, of a better human story. But spiritually, I feel like I'm a lot trapped within my own boundaries more than I would like to. Also, wanting to have everything, contained, we're all in this thing together under a blanket of comprehension. Sometimes I just also get blown away by how much everything is. Sometimes in very concrete ways. I remember standing on the coast of California, and the waves are beating on the rocks, and there's this restaurant where fancier people than I, and richer people than I, and appealing looking people are sitting outdoors on this sort of restaurant-y place where you'd order cocktails and then dinner, et cetera, et cetera. And I looked, I looked at the water breaking on the waves, and I looked at these people who are all living these lives um, in this place at that moment, and as with other times also. And then I get this thought: this is always here. Right now, I'm here. I get to see this thing, but meanwhile, when I'm at home, this is still going on. And it's way outside my awareness, and I feel so small. I feel that it's so big out there, and I have mixed feelings about coming down to the smallness. And my relationship with the cosmos is. Um, I'd rather have that mystical feeling of like this wonderful bond between um, the mystic and the one. My cosmos kind of, well, I don't see anything that isn't lifeless and indifferent and nothing to love, nothing that evokes the feelings that the mystics report of the. It's just so big too. Not only does it seem impersonal and just what it is in some indifferent way that it doesn't really have value embedded in it. But the mystics felt like it had sort of infinite value. So, as for me, I feel pretty fulfilled, though not as spiritually adequate as I would like to be, but pretty fulfilled to have put together what I'm in the video world to offer, which is not to make you one with everything, but to offer an integrated vision that includes a whole lot, so that there is a sense of wholeness. That not only is there a way of understanding what happened to our species when we stepped across we extricated ourselves from the niche in which we evolved biologically by inventing our own way of life. But we can see that means that there is a whole drama that on any planet, a breakthrough into civilization would present. We would be able to perceive ourselves for what we are. I think it can be shown that we are a species that developed an unusual level of consciousness, which enabled us to take an unprecedented step, which changed the dynamics of the world of life on Earth because we unleashed a destructive force. And it can be proven why that would be inevitable. My brother tells me, or my son tells me not to say it can be proven. Oh, well, I don't know what. But to my satisfaction, it can be proven. And that inevitably, such a creature would reach the point where it has the capacity to destroy itself and quite possibly take with it the larger system of life on Earth out of which it emerged during its biological evolution. We're on a journey that had some inevitable characteristics of a battle between that destructive force and the efforts of human beings and such to bring it under control so that life and its needs rule. And out of that process that's out of control because of the disorder that this unprecedented step inevitably leads to, gets swept up in a social evolutionary process that it doesn't control. Civilization has been significantly out of control from the beginning. That's important to understand. because we're like in the Western, our hero, the stagecoach is heading toward, maybe it will go off a cliff. The horses are just all spooked and racing. And our hero's trying to catch up with the stagecoach on his one horse. And he outpaces them. He jumps on and he turns them away from the abyss just at the very last minute. We're in that drama. We have reached the point where we actually could destroy ourselves. A couple of ways are already visible. And that was inevitable. It can be shown. I'm sorry, I can't say it another way. And so the challenge in this story of the better human story is we're like that hero that we jump on these horses before we blow ourselves up in a nuclear holocaust or bring the whole biospheric house down upon our shoulders. This is a drama. And it was sort of laid out in the cards that if any creature embarks on this path, leaves the natural order and enters this disorder, this is what's going to happen. And what is the outcome going to be? That's where we are in the drama. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. But it sure helps if we understand that as soon as we started changing the terms of our lives from the ones that we evolved in, it was inevitable that we were going to have to bring certain forces under control before they led to, for example, a nuclear holocaust, which could have happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, or through something like climate change if the worst of the scenarios turns out to be the one we play out. It's important. It's a piece of that contains a lot of the everything. Let's just put it that way. It contains the evolutionary understanding that is fundamental to understanding what made us what we are, what made the world what it is. Brings in the evidence of history and the inevitable dynamics that would emerge if you had this new kind of life form, a civilized society, whose interactions with others of its kind, unlike everything else in the biosphere, has not been selected for to be viable for the long term. In the natural order, the relationships and interactions of all the elements, the process of natural selection is continually working to make the system such that the interactions are all part of the synergy and viability of the thing that can continue to get all those forms of DNA into the future. But all of a sudden, with the emergence of something which is not a product of natural selection, but has been invented by an unprecedented kind of creaturely consciousness, such that for the first time in 3.5 billion years, there's a creature that can figure out how to get out of the limits that its niche imposed on it. Starts gardening and herding and all that stuff that led on inevitably. And then to understand another part of the everything, that my effort to do what it is that I can do when I'm not capable of doing the mystical thing, comprehending this big thing. That there emerges a selection process that inevitably favors whatever is able to prevail in a war of all against all. That's inevitable, and the consequences of it are huge. So we can work those consequences through to the point where we can say the ugliness that we see in human history is not a picture of what we are by nature. There's a systemic force that inevitably emerges, and oh my, what a thing to have to deal with. It's sort of a, your tragic hero thing. On the one hand, we become the dominant species on the planet in a way nothing else had ever been. But on the other hand, we have plunged into a situation which where we're being swept along way beyond our ability to control, and there's a lot of suffering that ensues from that. We could have more compassion for ourselves if we understand the mess that we've been is a function of our having descended into a kind of a nightmarish world that wasn't our choice, but it was an inevitable consequence of leaving the natural order. So the character, the human being, the drama is different. If you see this piece of everything, limited piece, but important. It's piece of everything. Gives us an understanding of ourselves that's actually rather welcome. We are better creatures than we have thought ourselves to be. And I think that it is, if we could move from our present cultural sense of what human nature is, which is pretty negative, to what I believe can be shown to be the appropriate way of understanding that this ugliness is the function of a force that we couldn't help but unleash once we stepped across into inventing our own way of life. We're the innocent victims of a new phase, being the instruments of a new phase of life's evolution on this planet, where a life form gets created by the creature because that creature's got a level of creative intelligence that's not been seen before on the planet. It goes way beyond a chimpanzee dipping a stick to get termites. And one of the consequences of that is, hey, we don't have to just gather those things. We can plant the seeds. Hey, we don't have to just hunt those things. We can bring them in as a herd under our control. Creativity. But that starts a process which cannot help but generate a selection for the ways of power, whatever can prevail in a war of all against all. So that what we see in the human world is the result of a systemic force that sees to it that what I call the spirit of the gangster will inevitably have a disproportionate say in how the human world is going to be organized and conduct its business. A lot of injury to human beings is an inevitable result of that inevitable social evolutionary process. See ourselves differently, see our history differently, see our challenge more clearly, that we're one of these civilizations, who knows how many times this experiment's been run elsewhere, where a creature jumps onto that bucking bronco and either will be at the end of the 8 seconds, it'll either be on the ground, having self-destructed, or the bunking bronco would stop bunking. There are probably successes and failures all around the many galaxies, billions of galaxies that there are in this incredible world, cosmos that I can't come to terms with. Wherever that happens, wherever the life evolves, as it probably often would, To create a creature that's got, I mean, the development of intelligence is definitely a clear strategy for the selective process. The mammals are more intelligent than the reptiles. Eventually, I would guess that selection for intelligence would generate some species that to do what we did and invent their own way of lives, pull themselves out of the order, find themselves all of a sudden in having unleashed a kind of disorder that's could end up with this civilization destroying itself. So this is the kind of thing that, for me, does have spiritual meaning. Actually, I mean, to feel myself as part of this species that's got this story. Uh, it's not an incoherent drama anymore. Uh, I just was looking at a book called The World, and it's a family history of humankind. I don't recommend it. I really was interested to see what he would do, but it was just like one damn thing after another, and none of it had any meaning, really. I mean, I was thinking of using a particular passage which showed the barbarism of all the early civilizations. The spirit of the gangster, I mean, we're talking about piles of heads, and in one place is, piles of penises of the people that they conquered. Barbaric. It's not strange that we have a poor opinion of ourselves. The children of Israel can't wait for a few weeks while Moses gets the word from God, and they're worshiping a golden calf. You know, contempt. The people are contemptible. The way we find people in history and in the societies that have been shaped this way are not a clear portrait of what we are by nature. We can see all the ways that we can be broken if we're living in a world where the force of brokenness has been unleashed and not brought under control. And indeed, we are pretty broken. But there are different ways of looking at it. Let's just take Donald Trump, who's like one of the biggest challenges for me to practice what I preach about not blaming the victim. Donald Trump is an unspeakably ugly human being. His ugliness brings up all kinds of feelings of revulsion in me. But I also understand something about the family that produced him. I mean, we have various histories about the father and about the older brother, and we've got a lot of word from his niece, the daughter of the brother that drank himself to death or whatever it was. This was a very destructive family. Too much and never enough is the title of Mary Trump's book. Now, human beings are not showing a wonderful face much of the time when we look at the main faces that we see, among which we've got Putin, Netanyahu, Trump, just to name those three that are, and Xi, a little cleaner image than the others, but still, the man who menaces Taiwan is showing the spirit of the gangster pretty well. I mean, you can talk about China's destiny, or China making up for all the insults it underwent when this proud Middle Kingdom was subjugated and ruined by imperial powers from Europe. Yeah, people have responses to their history. But Xi also belongs on that. The spirit of the gangster in all these people. And the amount of space they take up in terms of what are we looking at in the big picture of humankind. These three people take up a pretty big chunk. I mean, we can be proud in the United States that Joe Biden is another one of those people whose presence on the global stage has been mostly pretty impressive, incidentally, to my mind. The way he's handled Israel during this Gaza crisis is, to me, it's like falling off the vaulting horse at the Olympics, or the horse knocking over the bars. I've been very enthusiastic about Biden as leader of the free world, but I've been very upset and puzzled that President Biden has dealt with the Israeli regime in the way that he has. It's very upsetting to me. But Joe Biden is basically a decent person. Putin is not. Netanyahu is not. I mean, if it was nothing else, we could. Conservative former allies of Netanyahu have all turned against him because he can't be trusted. He's a sociopath, willing to extend the war because it serves his personal purposes better than ending the war. Unspeakably ugly. And then Trump, crazy on top of everything else these days. But if you can see how the force of brokenness that inevitably emerged with civilization has moved through the human world in a whole lot of complex but often traceable ways, you can see that what we have to do is bring this force of brokenness under control. It's an integrated picture, and that the various levels are connected. How kids are brought up, the pathologies of the culture of the Confederacy, just to name an example, couldn't be perpetuated the way it has, this force of brokenness, except through the upbringing of successive generations of children to be prepared to believe the lies, to refuse to renounce the evil that they fought for, which is white supremacy in the form of slavery or Jim Crow or whatever they could come up with. Hoping that Kamala sees a part of the everything and help weave it together, which I'm not sure they've been doing. The banner of freedom is one of their banners. But I'd like a more coherent picture. It's not always clear how freedom to make one's own medical choices connects with the freedom not to be exposed to gun violence. I think these forms of brokenness should be presented together so that people can see not just piece by piece, but the various elements where the denial of climate change and the exacerbation of race relations and the continuous lying and supporting the fascist dictator in Moscow rather than the democracy that he invaded. Put them all together so that people can see the composite picture. And that's another thing about trying to get the everything is that all these different things that the Trump and the Trump party and the Trump force are doing are making things more broken. And so you can see that there is, as it were, a spirit seeing things whole, making you one with everything to see that there is a force of brokenness at work here. And it is that force that needs to be broken. For psychological reasons, I think. I'm not very good at dissolving my boundaries. I live a somewhat hermetic life here on the edge of a ridge overlooking some mountains and forests. I'm alone, and that sort of suits where my life brought me. A lot of boundaries. I'm just not going to be very good at getting there through the dissolving of the boundaries. So I've taken the other, I think lesser, but still very useful, I think as it turns out, path of putting the picture together of how things work, what things mean, a way of understanding. Mystics are not big on understanding. Mystics always say, you know, throw away the books. They think that that is a misguided way toward the destination. And I think toward their destination it is. But it does take you to a destination. And so I invite you to go to my website where I lay out this bit of everything that I've been able to put together. betterhumanstory.org. If you're interested in being more one with everything, I think you'll find something of value there. And I do wonder, you know, make me one with everything. Is that a basic human spiritual need? I've talked about myself, but I have the feeling that a lot of people have a yearning for a mystical place. And a lot of people, I think, also like the idea of a system of understanding, a larger framework. Not sure what larger frameworks are out there that have been particularly useful to people. Over the years, I encounter people who talk about, say, Ken Wilber's framework. I don't, and then there's like the Gurdjieff movement, Ouspensky. There are some of them out there, but I've never been able to feel that they accomplished what I wanted to have accomplished, or established the validity of things in a way that I respected it. But you can put my Better Human Story into the category of what aspires to be able to provide something like that, a framework within which the phenomena make more sense. Freud and Marx did that sort of thing too, in a more strictly intellectual way. I'm happy to go up against either of those, but though they've already fallen out of favor, I'm happy to go up, even though both of them call attention to some important things. So I make some big claims that when I took the path that I indicated in that freshman paper of trying to put all the pieces together and seeing things whole as the way of being one with everything. It's my life's work, and it's been a source of a lot of satisfaction. And I also believe that if it could get out there better, our story would be more likely to end well. I think it could have a beneficial impact on the question of whether humankind, human civilization gets its act together well enough and soon enough to survive on this planet for the long haul, or whether we destroy ourselves. I don't know how big of an impact, but big enough that I think if it's a close call, it could matter. And so I don't give up on trying to get it out there. Please check it out at abetterhumanstory.org. Thank you. Oh, and if you'd like and subscribe and follow and send this link around to anybody if you think it's worth other people's attention. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.